The Genesee is more than a river.
Throughout Rochester's history, it served as a dividing line that people and cultures don't cross.
People seem to think that it's like East Berlin and West Berlin divided down the middle.
The Berlin Wall is made of concrete and barbed wire.
But in Rochester, the wall is made of perceptions. Perceptions like those evident at dances in the 1930s.
We thought that they didn't want us, and we always felt that they were just a little too rough, and we didn't care for them on our side.
If you were driving out of the city and you stopped at a gas station, for example, and you said, where's to the station attendant, where is Arundequite? He'd say, you're headed in the right direction, just roll your window down, and when you start to smell money, then you'll be in Arundequite.
That was 50 years ago.
But perceptions about the two sides of the river remain even today.
My sisters always said nobody would ever live anywhere but Brighton, Pittsford, Parrington. And
I myself could live on the east side, and certainly wouldn't have any problem moving back there. I lived there. I certainly don't feel that I'm stepping up when I drive out there, and I don't feel like I'm stepping down when I come home.
I do feel that the west side is more blue collar. There's industry, there's more industry there, Rochester Products, Delco, Kodak. The east side is, I feel there are more professional workers. There are more families where both the husband and wife are professionals. They have more discretionary income.
It's just a different feeling on the east side. There's a more warmer feeling on the west side. It's more together feeling.
Some of the commonly held perceptions are myths.
But there are some real differences between the east side and west side of the county. The east side of the county has more people. The 1980 census says 395,000 people live there.
The west side has about 100,000 fewer residents. In housing, a west side home costs an average of $46,300.
There's a big difference on the east side. The average owner-occupied house there costs about $13,000 more. Income is also higher on the east side, an average family income between $40,000 and $50,000.
On the west side, an average income is between $30,000 and $35,000. Educational levels are lower too. People over 25 with college degrees make up only 8.7% of the west side population.
But on the east side, the percentage is nearly twice as high, 16%. Most of the county's Hispanic population lives on the east side.
But the concentration of black residents is greater on the west side. More crime is committed on the east side, about 58% of the county's crime.
East side and west side cultures and lifestyles can differ.
And they can differ in interesting ways.
At the Rochester Philharmonic, 2/3 of season ticket holders come from the east side.
But most of the county's bowling lanes are on the west side.
We sell many more Wall Street journals on the east side than we do on the west side, and also the New York Times. But contrary to that, the New York Post and the New York News sell much better on the west side than they do on the east side, probably because of the different type of people.
Jiva Theater has 5 east side subscribers for every 1 from the west side.
Sam Trapani owns restaurants on both sides of the city, Peaches on the west, the Big Apple on the east.
We noticed that we sell quite a bit more red meats on the west side of Rochester at Peaches, here at Peaches. And at the Big Apple we sell quite a bit more seafood.
Well, regardless of where you eat, there are some real differences between east side and west side in Monroe County to chew on.
The differences are important as Rochester heads into its 3rd century. The distinctions between east and west tell us where we came from, what we're doing, and where we're going as a community.
This week, Jim and I will look at those distinctions, see how some are getting stronger and how some are disappearing. In many ways, Monroe County residents define themselves by where they live.
And in many ways, others make judgments about them for the very same reason.
East Avenue and the Penfield and the Pittsford and the Brightons, you know, I don't have to tell you, if you've been in the city any length of time, that that's where the affluent society lives.
I think that west of the river is almost totally middle class.
The west side is
is more stable? Down home folks?
Since I grew up a lot on the east side, I don't want to say anything too bad, but I think they're more, they care more about what other people think about them and are going to say.
You can say this about the east side: most of the county's power is there, and it always has been.
I can remember politically, most of your judges came east of the river, like 90% of them. They came from Brighton or Pittsford or some east side of the 21st Ward. But that's because they had more lawyers and doctors. They were, better educated.
In 1984, much of Rochester's power remains east. The mayor, city manager, county executive, sheriff, district attorney, most city and county judges, the president of Kodak, all live on the east side. The police and fire chiefs, one city judge, and only 2 county judges live on the west side.
The west side always seems to be the last side plowed out when it comes to snow.
That history of power and money on the east side goes back a long way.
There's an old tradition there, Gary. It goes way back right to the beginning in 1789. We had wonderful agricultural land. So right from the beginning, you had people with money coming in here and buying up land and building beautiful and quite substantial homes. So you had a kind of a tradition of money right from the beginning in Pittsford.
Many of the Italian people that first came to Rochester and settled here were people who were skilled tailors. And the tailor shops were on the east side of the Genesee River. As a result, many of those people lived close to where they worked. And so they ended up settling on the east side of the Genesee River. And many of those people today still live on the east side of the Genesee River.
And many of the country's new citizens who settled early on the west side are still there. The workers who gravitated to west side industries wanted to live nearby. They came to work for the city's public works department, the waterworks, maintenance garages, and they stayed. Their children stayed too. Realtors and builders agree.
People on the east side buy on the east side, people on the west side buy on the west side. It's just what you're used to.
Usually people don't switch from one side of the river to the other anyway.
The Real Estate Board of Rochester knows those switches don't happen very often. Its listings are divided right down the middle, east and west. That's because when customers come in, that's what they say. We want a house on the east, or we want a house on the west. Lou Spiatti won't switch. He's in his 70s now and has lived on the west side all his life.
My children, my brothers, my sister lives in the neighborhood, my 2 sisters, my brother, and my friends. And, I couldn't leave this. I couldn't leave my family. I couldn't leave my friends. I couldn't leave the area.
Sam Trapani owns 2 restaurants, Peaches on the west side, the Big Apple on the east. He too senses that strong attachment to family on the west side.
If I had a question about a particular structure in the neighborhood or some history about a particular individual, I can very easily go out and ask one of the neighbors over here who's been living here for the past 60-some-odd years.
There is more evidence of transience on the east side, of areas where families move so often that sense of neighborhood history is lost. The 1980 census says that 70% of the executives, administrators, and professional specialists in Monroe County live on the east side.
Because so few people move from one side of the river to the other, feelings and beliefs that were learned in childhood often don't change when reality changes. Gay Lenhart lives here in Spencerport, and she's convinced that many East Siders don't know where it is. She told Gary it happened last month at an RPO concert.
We were privileged to sit with a couple from Pittsford, and we exchanged introductions and where we lived. And when they learned that we came from Spencerport, they inferred that we came from a long distance, which I said was not true. I don't think they've been to Spencerport. They don't realize how close it really is to Rochester.
As Lenhart says, it is closer than people think. Many of the people we talk to in this series say that false perceptions about any given community in Monroe County are dissolving. The highway system makes it easier to get almost anywhere. And as East Siders and West Siders find more reasons to cross the river, those false perceptions about life on the other side begin to disappear.
And county leaders who are pushing for a community of Monroe concept in government want to see that pride in individual communities remain. But they also know they'll fail in a county-wide approach to problem solving as long as they can't convince county residents that we're all in this together.
It's a game between East Side McQuaid and West Side Aquinas in this year's Section 5 playoffs. McQuaid won this year's battle, making it 10 wins in the last 22 years. Aquinas has won 12 times.
That rivalry between the two schools kind of typifies East and West. McQuaid is down in the wealthier part of town, the Pittsford, Brighton area. Aquinas is more the Kodak workers, the people around the west side there, I think are not as wealthy. I think they're more neighborhood-oriented.
For each side, it's us against them, and off the field, the judgments go far beyond how well the other side plays football.
What do you think is the difference between the east side of town and the west side of town?
I think of leather jackets, things like that. And I think people in the east side have more spirit, more organized, and people in the west are not as organized and don't show as much class.
East side, they don't have no class. They don't know how to dress, man. They ain't cool. West side's cool.
Everything's been given to them, man. Well, we got to get it the hard way.
They think we're lowlifes.
What's your answer to that?
We aren't. You go to a McQuaid dance and no one will want to talk to you. They don't want nothing to do with you.
Lifelong West Sider Lou Spiotti had similar problems at dances 50 years ago.
We asked for a dance every set. If you danced with some of the East Side girls or cut in somewheres, there was a little animosity there, see? Then they would say, well, we're going to get him when he goes outside. So now, when you go outside, they gang up, and there was the fist fights.
County Elections Commissioner James Chivaroli has lived a lot of Rochester's history and learned about the rest. He says the East-West rivalries weren't always confined to the dance floor.
Football was banned from high schools for 22 years. And because it was an East-West high school game, one of the students was killed in a riot or after the football game.
West High no longer exists. The building is now the Wilson Magnet School. Football served as an east-west dividing line outside of school, too. For years, people on the east and west lined up behind semi-pro teams, the Russers on the west, the Oxfords on the east. Their contests used to draw thousands of people to Silver Stadium. But back at school, the old East High-West High rivalry extended to other sports as well.
There were always a lot of fights. It was primarily after basketball.
So when East Side and West Side kids take jabs at each other today, they're carrying out a tradition their grandparents knew well. Us versus them, East versus West.
Educational levels are different on the two sides of the river. The percent of the population over 25 and college educated on the east side is twice as great as on the west. Most of the county's college students come from the east side. Here at the University of Rochester, where tuition is more than $8,200 a year, nearly 70% of Monroe County residents in this year's freshman class are from the east side. At St. John Fisher, it is also 70% compared to 30% from the west side. At MCC, 58% of freshmen who are county residents come from the east, 41% from the west. At RIT, the numbers are much closer, 49% from the east, 51% from the west. It is schools that help give many neighborhoods their identity. They can create a bond that passes from generation to generation, create a neighborhood allegiance that realtors see every day.
Very hard to get anybody to relocate from one side to the other. Almost impossible. You'll find very few people that are native Rochesterians who grew up on one side of the river who would even consider living on the other side.
You're used to growing up and going to the same shopping center and going to the same school, and your children go to the same school, and they have the same teachers and the same coaches that you had when you were in school, and it's just a very comfortable situation to be in.
They'd like to identify with the community where they live, particularly when the children are going through school, then they become involved in the community, and it's very important out here. So that I think the people that live in Pittsford on an average identify themselves more with Pittsford than people who live in some of the other towns.
There is a growing West Side reputation for excellence, too. Greece Athena High School, for example, was the only upstate secondary school earlier this month to be given a federal education award for excellence. Only 114 of these awards were given nationwide.
I have received quite a few calls, I would say at least 2 to 3 a week, where parents have called to see if they could send their students to Athena, or if they could pay tuition if they were outside of the district so that their students could come into our school due to this award its Excellence in Education program.
In the city of Rochester, the new magnet schools are chipping away at the traditional east-west rivalries. Although only 6,000 students attend, the magnets attract students from throughout the city, not just from the neighborhood.
I remember when I first came to school, going over the river, I mean, I'd be totally lost west of the river. And through traveling with my friends, I've gotten real comfortable. You know, I'm comfortable outside of my neighborhood as well.
And I really don't think there's any difference between people who live on the west side and people who live on the east side of the river. It's not like people on the east side have green spots and people on the west side have purple.
Though some students may be learning that people on the other side of the river are much the same as they are, many parents learned a different lesson when they were in school.
And it's an education those parents can take with them to work. Tomorrow, we'll take a look at where East Siders and West Siders work as our series East Side, West Side continues.
Rochester is a city divided. The bosses live on the east side, the working man lives on the west.
I think the people who lived on the east side are probably more anti-union than the people on the west side. Mainly because every time an executive moves into this area, whoever employs them recommends they live on the east side of town.
There is a lot of blue-collar people on the west side. And if and when the economy starts to take a dip, they're the first people to feel the consequences of it.
Much of the West Side's character is imposed by the county's largest employer, Eastman Kodak. 53,000 people work there. More than half of them live on the west side. Dave Fadden is one of them. He's been at Kodak 18 years and likes the company's stability. But he's also seeing changes.
The old school thought was as long as you kept your nose clean, you could pretty much get away with almost anything and be secure in your job. That train of thought is changing rapidly because of the competitiveness in the marketplace now. A company like Kodak can no longer tolerate the people who are just getting by.
Fadden lives in Greece, just 5 minutes from work.
That's a long way from Kodak's management, most of which lives on the east side. According to the 1980 census, so do 70% of the executives, professionals, and administrators in Monroe County. The east side is more white-collar. The county's second and third largest employers are on the east side of the river, and the workers there mostly are white-collar. Xerox has a payroll of more than 12,000, nearly 9,000 of whom are white-collar. The University of Rochester has the county's third largest workforce, employing 8,900. Nearly 8,000 of them are white-collar.
Organized labor's stronghold is on the west side. The United Auto Workers have 5,000 members at Rochester Products. 3,200 members of the International Union of Electrical and Technical Workers have jobs at Delco. That's today. But as computers and robotics move more and more into industry, union leaders say the traditional blue-collar worker could become a thing of the past. Union leaders say the union member of the future will wear white collars.
I think you'll find the new union members, the computer operators, computer technicians, the high-tech stuff, those people will be a different type of union member than we've had today or have in the past history. And I think a lot of them might be on the east side of town.
Right now, there's a big difference in how much money East Siders and West Siders make. The median family income in Greece is almost a third less than in Pittsford.
The character of a community depends a lot on how it uses its land. The way a community uses its land can tell you a lot about it. 55% of the people live on the east side, and census figures show the west side is more industrial. Look at Gates, where Kodak has its Elm Grove plant. 21% of the town's land is either commercial or industrial. On the east side, the most heavily industrial and commercial town is Webster, only 7.4%.
In Rochester's night spots, jobs are often a topic of conversation. Hostess Nancy DeJoy says East Siders are more status conscious when it comes to jobs.
I'm not really sure why. Possibly because they compare it to what they're doing or base some kind of judgment on the people they meet by what they do for a living.
Living on the east side or living on the west side can also determine what you do after work.
Tomorrow night, we'll look at what you do for fun as our series East Side, West Side continues.
Gary Spencer did some demographic studies before deciding to locate his commercial hot tub and suntan parlor on the corner of Park and Oxford on the city's east side.
Demographics looked like there was a lot of young professionals in this area, and this looked like the perfect thing for them.
His plan worked. He's getting just the customers he was looking for. At nearby Blade's restaurant just off University Avenue, owner Peter Eric knows his quick success came partly from those 3 real estate maxims that every agent learns early: location, location, and location.
We had the opportunity to move into the West Side, and you know, we thought very seriously about it, but the economics of it were just not as positive as it would be on this side of the city. We are in the area that most of the people in this area are what is now, you know, everybody calls yuppies. It's a young urban professional area that is, you know, highly mobile. They're in the upper economic area.
They are, to a large extent, single, too. The East Avenue, Park Avenue area is lined with apartments housing young singles. There are nearly 98,000 singles on the east side, only 68,000 on the west side. And when those singles go out, it is often to a place like Blade's.
I think that people feel more comfortable with their own kind they can relate to. And I'm a college graduate, I'm a professional, I'm an accountant. And I am probably more comfortable hanging out, as you say, with other college graduates, other professionals, than someone that works in a factory.
That pasteurization exists elsewhere on the east side, too. West Siders can feel it.
A snobbery about the west side? I think there might be a little bit of that, yes.
What makes you think so?
Oh, because I think that there are certain country clubs on the east side that seem to have a status about them that we do not have. That type of thing, a social status of some kind.
There's more status. There's a lot of professional people on the east side. And I think that there's maybe more shopping or something like that, this status symboled country clubs and things like that too.
Of the 8 private country clubs in Monroe County, 6 are on the east side. But most of the county's bowling lanes are on the west.
And bowling is a blue-collar sport, so they bowl in their own area.
It's not just bowling and golf that separates the 2 sides of the county. Sports rivalries go back for decades. East Side boxing clubs fought West Side boxing clubs for the city championship for years. In one history-making championship bout in 1916, Sam Nolan and Charlie Gauss managed to knock each other out at the same time in the 6th round.
Nancy DeJoy has worked in both East Side and West Side bars. She's a hostess on the East Side now.
If you go into other bars on the other side of the city, you'll get a more wide variety of people with, say, based on income, say lower income to higher income. Right? I would say the people that come in here have not all the same income, but are in a certain class.
Sam Trapani owns restaurants on both sides of the river. In his West Side Peaches, he sees more families, but increasingly now he's seeing East Siders, some of them not feeling very much at home.
I feel that people still come to the area with a little bit of skepticism and a little bit of doubt. They're concerned. If I come in and watch on any given night, I can very easily pick out people that have been here for the first time. People feel that it's very unusual for something this sophisticated to be in the city in the 19th Ward. And it makes a big difference for us. We have to work harder for that. We have to really work hard to try and get people to realize that, hey, you can really come to the West Side and have something nice.
It's only one thing that some East Siders don't realize about the West.
And as we've seen this week, there exist among many West Siders some strong misconceptions about the East.
People on both sides of the river are justifiably proud of where they live, but the only way those misconceptions are going to dissolve is for people on both sides of the river to get out and do a little exploring.
As one East Sider told us, it's not like you need a passport. Gary Nurenberg.
Jim Redmond, WOKR News.